the wall. After running about 20 miles, a runner hits an invisible wall, an apparently insurmountable physiological barrier that stops them in their tracks. Muscle coordination goes out the window, and self-doubt casts a deep shadow over the soul. Dick Beardsley describes hitting the wall at the second marathon of his career. It was like an elephant had jumped out of a tree onto my shoulders and was making me carry it in the rest of the way. Now, luckily, I didn't have to worry about hitting the wall when I was a kid. In April, the whole Call family would pile into the big red van, which had been carefully packed with donuts and pastries and goodies, and we would head downtown to cheer on our uncle who was running the St. Louis Marathon. Those were awesome days. We would cheer him on at the start line, then pile back into the van, stuff ourselves silly, then drive to the next 5-mile mark, slap him high fives, then pile back into the van, and repeat the process until our stomachs ached, and our uncle had completed the 26.2 miles. After runners finish a marathon, they get 2 things, a medal and a silver cape. The silver cape helps prevent runners' chills, keeping their bodies warm after they've just been through such a huge physical toll. And the image of my uncle after the marathon is forever stamped in my mind. His body hunched over and limping, and his face as white as his hair. But with that silver cape, he looked like Superman to me. And Superman had always been my favorite of all the superheroes because he could fly. And whenever I had a chance to make a wish growing up, whether it was blowing out birthday candles, throwing a penny into the fountain, or breaking off the larger half of the turkey bone, I always wished for the same thing, that I could fly. And seeing my uncle on marathon day, I knew one thing. I wanted one of those capes. When I was 11 years old, my mom, dad, older sister Kelly, younger brother Glenn, and I were sitting around the kitchen table. Mom and Dad told us that morning that we were going to have a new baby brother or sister. We went ballistic! We started running around the kitchen table, jumping on chairs, slapping high fives, hugging, crying, laughing. We could not wait. And 9 months later, on June 6, 1994, Katie Rose Call came into our lives. And wherever we would go, Katie's charm and charisma would ignite a sparkle in any stranger's eye. I used to describe to my classmates when I was in high school at Nearings Hall that Katie was like my little angel with a spark of wild Irish rose. The Irish fire runs deep in Katie. And looking back, it's always hard to remember life before Katie because our family wasn't really complete until she came along. 2.5 years after Katie was born, I found myself sitting around that same kitchen table with Mom, Dad, Kelly, Glennon, and this time Katie too. And the news we got that morning made me want to get up and run and scream, but for much different reasons. Mom and Dad told us that morning that Katie had been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. We were terrified. I didn't really understand what cystic fibrosis all was, and I could barely even pronounce it. But I knew it was scary by seeing the tears streaming down my mother's face. But Katie, only 2.5 years old at the time, climbed up on her lap and hugged her tightly. "It's okay, Mommy. It's just my tummy." And through the years, my family learned more and more about cystic fibrosis. CF, what we call cystic fibrosis for short, is a genetic disease that clogs mucus in the lungs and other parts of the body, making it difficult to breathe. It also affects the digestive system, pancreas, and liver. So before every meal or every snack, Katie has to take enzymes to help her break down and absorb the food. Now, when she was a baby, I used to pop open the capsules and sprinkle them onto applesauce to make them easier to swallow. But Katie has some mad skills now. She can pop 7 of those and swallow them at once. And every morning and every evening, Katie does a series of treatments for about a half an hour, including wearing a vest, which looks like a lifesaver jacket, connected to a machine by long black tubes. And the vest shakes and vibrates her, helping to break up the mucus in her lungs. Because cystic fibrosis only affects 30,000 people in the United States, it is a highly neglected disease and receives very little funding. And though CF research has made huge strides over the years, there still is no cure for cystic fibrosis. In 1965, Mary Weiss became a volunteer for the CF Foundation after learning that her 3 little boys had CF. Now, in 1965, many of the incredible medicines and treatments we have for CF today had not yet been discovered. So imagine how terrified Mary must have been. Her youngest, 4-year-old son, Richard, was listening closely to his mother as she made phone calls after phone calls, seeking out financial support for CF research. "Mom, I know what you are working for." Mary was dumbstruck because Richard did not know what she was doing, nor did he know that he had CF. "What am I working for, Richard?" "You are working for 65 roses." "Yes, Richard, I am working for 65 roses." And 65 roses, much easier to pronounce than cystic fibrosis, has been used by children of all ages to describe their disease. And the rose, the ancient symbol of love, has become a registered trademark for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And it also happens to be Katie's middle name. When Katie was growing up, I used to share with her a prized souvenir from a Disney World vacation, a bottle of gold fairy dust. "Katie, if we go outside right now and you close your eyes tight and think of things that make you happy and I sprinkle some gold fairy dust on you, you will be able to fly." I always made excuses about why we weren't going to give it a go that day. But I promised her that someday I was going to make her fly. And she believed me, like any loyal little sister would. In 2004, when Katie was 10 years old, our uncle, the marathon runner, decided to take his little grasshopper under his wings and teach her to run. Because running is the best way to build strong and healthy lungs. Every Saturday morning, Katie and Uncle would meet at Vianney High School's track and they would run. And Katie did not enjoy this in the beginning. In fact, she dreaded it. But Uncle's a very smart man and he thought of different incentives to get her excited about running. So for every lap she did around the track meet, she got a bag of M&Ms. And after every training session, without fail, Katie and Uncle would share a celebration breakfast at White Castle. During the same time, I had just moved to New York City after graduating from Northwestern University, my first year in the real world, trying to figure out how the heck I was going to pay rent and do the whole acting thing. I was eating more than my fair share of M&Ms and White Castle sliders during this time. And not because I had run around the track, but because I was scared out of my mind. I was getting eaten alive at auditions, so I in turn was eating everything I could get my hands on. That Thanksgiving, Mom and Dad flew me back to St. Louis, and I returned home 20 pounds heavier, both physically and emotionally. Thanksgiving morning, Uncle wanted Katie to join him for a run, and Katie would have nothing to do with that. It was a holiday, everybody was home on break, she just wanted a day off. So my family cut her a deal. We would all go to the track. The family would walk while I would run with Katie and Uncle. And it was during that run that I shared with them my dream of one day running a marathon. So I returned to New York City with renewed energy. I had a plan. I do really well with plans. And I went on Google and I signed up for Chicago's 2005 marathon to run for Team Cystic Fibrosis. And my uncle, who had retired from marathon running a few years back because of arthritis, couldn't resist either, so he signed up too. He trained in St. Louis, I trained in New York City, and that October, the whole family, as well as a best friend from high school, drove up to Chicago to cheer us on. And around mile 19 or 20, right when we were about to hit the wall, Katie and my mom and Aunt Kathy joined us for a couple of those miles, re-energizing us, sending us off to finish the marathon. And when I crossed that finish line, it was like the first time in my life I felt truly empowered against cystic fibrosis. And suddenly, New York wasn't so scary either. It was official. I had been bitten by the marathon bug. And after Chicago came marathons in DC, New York City, and Raleigh, all for Team Cystic Fibrosis, bringing in over $15,000. In 2006, I heard the story of Michelle Thompson. Now, Michelle was riding her bike from her hometown in Illinois along Route 66, 2,500 miles to where her brother lived in California. She was riding her bike to raise money and awareness for her brother, who had been battling oral cancer at the time. Now, Michelle was not a cyclist. She was not even a wannabe cyclist. But she was determined to take that journey for her brother. And throughout her journey, she hit the wall many times. 10 flat tires, 2 falls that cracked her bike helmet, and many nights spent huddled in the laundry rooms of campgrounds trying to escape the frigid temperatures. And it took Michelle a lot longer to finish than she had anticipated. But on Christmas morning, Michelle rode her bike up the driveway of her brother's house. I was in complete awe of this woman. And the crazy thing is, she has no idea that her story molded the past 5 years of my life. On May 21st, 2007, I emailed my friend Dan. Hey Dan, I can definitely relate to wanting to take a massive journey. Do you know what I've been daydreaming about lately? In my dream world, I would do a certain version of what Michelle did, except not biking, but either jogging, running, or walking, not sure which one, but a huge distance. Spreading awareness, so few people even know what CF is, and raising money, and maybe even incorporating acting into the journey. Like I could put together a little one-woman show about my life in Katie and CF and running, and perform it in the different places that I run through. Does this sound totally nutty? I don't know. Sometimes my daydreams get a little huge. But the idea hit me as I was running along the Hudson River yesterday. It was a beautiful day, and my iPod was blaring some great music, and the idea just kind of came to me. And I got so jazzed about it, I just started running faster and faster, and such a rush, a high, you know? And hey, if you want to join me on my run across the country, you let me know.